This is me, Beryl Zelig, at the age of 8 days, held in the arms of my Zeta. It was on that day that I had a Brit Milah, a ritual circumcision, and entered into a covenant with God and the Jewish people. I had a traditional upbringing, attending shul once a year and celebrating major Jewish holidays with friends and family. I had a bar mitzvah, and while I had no idea what it meant, I read the words Lech Lecha, go to yourself, a message that would later be the impetus for a total spiritual transformation. After university, I embarked on a journey to the land of Israel. I worked on a kibbutz and studied at a yeshiva, a place to learn the Torah and Talmud. I settled down in Toronto, married my beautiful wife Abby, and I currently work both as a Jewish studies teacher and filmmaker. I love my community. We have many great leaders, we've built many great institutions, and have created a vibrant life for Jews in Canada. But I saw another side to the community, and I had a lot of questions. Why are parents expected to pay up to $21,000 a year for Jewish education? Why do we have 50,000 Jews living below the poverty line? And why do we live in a community where so many important decisions are made in the boardrooms instead of the town halls? I embarked on a quest to find out what's really happening in Canada's Jewish community. At every turn I was told to Sha Shtil, to be quiet and not ask questions. I hope we can live in an open Jewish community where issues can be talked about publicly, where we can look at the cracks in the foundation in order to let the light shine in.
Sha Shtil, mach nicht kein Gerede, der Rebbe geht schon tanzen wieder. Sha Shtil, mach nicht kein Gewalt, der Rebbe geht schon tanzen bald. Und als der Rebbe tanzt, zieht nie lo mir alle Pfetten nicht die Welt. Sha Shtil, mach nicht kein Gerede, der Rebbe geht schon tanzen.
Jewish settlement in Canada began in the mid-18th century. Aaron Hart, one of the earliest Jewish pioneers, settled in Trois-Rivières, Quebec, and his 4 sons quickly gained prominence in the new land. Most of the early Jewish settlers were either fur traders or served in the British Army. The Jewish community of only 200 built the Spanish and Portuguese synagogue in 1768 in Montreal. By 1850, there were about 450 Jews in Canada, yet they created organizations like the Montreal Hebrew Benevolent Society in order to take care of the needs of the community. As the 19th century drew to a close, the Jewish community built many significant institutions to address the influx of immigration, largely because of the pogroms in Russia.
So you had 2 forces in the Jewish community. The established community, which did more philanthropic work, and the Jewish labor movement, which did more grassroots, more responsive work and was run by the Jewish poor themselves and the Jewish labor movement.
In 1921, the Jewish population swelled to 126,000. Several small organizations merged together in 1919 to create the Canadian Jewish Congress, which was created to speak on behalf of the interests of Jewish Canadians, but it went dormant until 1933. The Jewish population continued to grow at a rapid pace until the revised Immigration Act of 1927 shut the doors to Jewish immigrants. When Hitler and the Nazi Party took power in Germany, anti-Semitism both in Europe and at home became the dominant concern. One of Montreal's largest newspapers, Le Devoir, printed slurs like, "Why change one's name if one can't change one's nose? Avoid Jewish shopkeepers who have cheating and corruption in their bloodstream." Such incidents prompted the Canadian Jewish Congress to re-establish itself under the leadership of Samuel Jacobs. But as anti-Semitism increased, so did the Sha Shtil, the silencing of community voices. It was decided then that Samuel Bronfman, Canada's wealthiest Jew, would take over as president of the Congress.
There were a few people who had a lot of money. I mean, Sam Bronfman was made president of the Congress, not because of his natural talents for leading the Congress, but because of his wealth.
And he created around him a group of wealthy Jews who stood as the representatives of the Jewish community.
They figured that, with his ties and with his money, the organization would flourish. He did not mention anything about Nazi Germany, and he did not mention anything about what was happening to the Jews in Europe, and he also did not mention anti-Semitism in Canada. He left those topics alone. All he talked about was loyalty, and that Canadian Jewry has to speak with one voice.
Precisely at dawn on September 1st, without warning, the German Wehrmacht rolled over the Polish border. Before the invasion was 30 minutes old, the planes of the Luftwaffe were over Poland, wiping out the Polish Air Force.
As the war started, there seemed to be a belief that you couldn't talk much about what was happening to the Jewish communities in Europe. You had to keep that on the back burners because you had to be patriotic.
There was basically a mood in North America of a Sha Shtil mentality, and that was to basically ignore and not publicize what was happening to the Jews in Europe. It was almost a conceived cover-up of the tragedy that was befalling our people. It was, let's not make waves, let's be quiet about it, let's not turn it into a Jewish issue. Bronfman emulated that kind of policy in this country.
The Canadian Jewish Congress made the slaughter of millions of European Jews inconsequential during the war.
Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehiyanu v'kimanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh.
The post-war boom brought prosperity and a flood of new immigrants to Canada, and there was a significant Jewish community in all major cities.
The Six-Day Middle East War echoes along a second front, the diplomatic struggle at the United Nations Security Council. A series of emotionally charged meetings keeps delegates debating on nearly around-the-clock basis.
The Jewish community had hoped that Canada would come out in firm condemnation of the Arab side. Canada did not do so.
It drove home to diaspora Jews in general, not just in Canada, that Israel was vulnerable and that its enemies had not given up on the idea of eliminating the state of Israel.
As a consequence of the failure of the Jewish community to influence government policy, several members of the Jewish community and the organized Jewish community sat down in the immediate aftermath of the Six-Day War, and they began to reflect on what needed to be done. And what needed to be done, they understood, was the organization of a true lobby organization, the creation of an institution that would lobby effectively. And as a result of this was created the Canada-Israel Committee.
In the 1960s and 70s, the federations had emerged as the major players on the national scene, and one of the issues that has been very much a part of the dynamics of Canadian Jewish organizations since that time has been the interplay between Canadian Jewish Congress and the Federation.
The community tends to be over-organized in a way that confuses people. There's a whole alphabet soup of agencies out there, from JIAS to JNF to CJC to UJA to UJA Federations Canada.
There was this sense on the part of this element of the community, this 1% so-called, that the organized community, the advocacy organizations, primarily, again, CIC, were not doing an effective job. And that this element could do a better job. Primarily these businessmen could do a better job. And they decided to create another institution.
The question I've had is, why would you do it the way you've done it? And was it done for the best of reasons, or was it done out of personal resentment? Was it done because the government of Canada wanted it done this way as a friend of Israel? Why did you do it this way, and why did you not have a conversation about it? What are you hiding?
No one suggests that the Christians should speak with a single voice. No one suggests that the Muslims should speak with a single voice. They have numerous factions and divisions and denominations that speak to the issues, and there's no reason why we as Jews shouldn't have a similar opportunity.
I think people aren't either familiar with CJA enough to have that kind of confidence, or say that because it's centralized in Ottawa, and it seems to be one person speaking for the entire country, they're really not capable of rising to the occasion, of rising to the level that Congress had.
Men frequently tell me, well, Norma, we've reached 25% on our board. Isn't that great? Aren't you happy that we have 25% women when only 2 decades ago we couldn't find 2 women to rub together to represent? And I'm not satisfied, and I don't know what they're thinking.
When you have an imposed, centralized system, you don't have the ability to really find out and have a table for the airing of different views.
If you are farther off, either to the right or the left, on Israel matters, you're not going to fit in well with CJA.
We applied several times, more than several times, to CJA and got nothing. In fact, last time we applied, they didn't even acknowledge our application. And there's an old Jewish vaudeville joke. And the guy goes to the doctor, and says, "Doctor, it hurts when I go like this. What should I do?" And the doctor says, "Don't go like that." Okay, so after a while, you realize where you're blocked, and you don't use your precious energy there any longer.
If a public organization will not talk to a filmmaker addressing salient, important issues in the community, I think they're hiding something.
The fact that Jewish students on campus feel they needed a separate voice from the Hillel, they needed to do something that the Hillel wasn't doing, shows a failure in the actions of the Hillel. Shows a failure in the advocacy that they're doing.
The major problems that the pro-Israel students, student activists, whatever you want to call them, face is actually internal, and it's a shame, because what we need is grassroots student-run initiatives.
And to say that it doesn't have an effect on the majority of students, or it's not gaining ground or something like that is just wrong.
Kind of a variant on what I call the Sha Shtil tradition in the organized Jewish world. Be quiet, don't make waves, don't be aggressive. And I don't really think that that works.
When you have a large organization dictating to students what will be run on their campuses, and when you have staff people dictating and staff people initiating and staff people running and organizing and attending, and you're left wondering, well, where do the students fit in?
Hello? Hi, is this Hillel of Greater Toronto?
Somewhat. We're having some issues with our phones, so I'm a staff member and the calls are being forwarded to me. What can I try to help you with?
I'm doing a documentary on Canada's Jewish community, and I wanted to know where I can find more information on the programs that Hillel runs, and sort of to see if you have a breakdown.
What do you mean? Like how much we spend on student programming?
Yeah, exactly.
No, and that's not something that's really public either.
The average cost of Jewish day school for a full-time student ranges anywhere from about $12,000-13,000 a year to $22,000 a year. And if you were in a province like Quebec where there was government funding, then that would go right down to about $6,000 or $8,000 a year.
If you're in the middle, it's a lot more difficult because tuition committees are not all that willing to subsidize people in the middle. I mean, everybody has to ask, what should I sacrifice in order to get kids in day school?
It's very difficult for a lot of people. A lot of middle-class parents are refinancing their homes, and they're the ones, I think, that are suffering the most.
The cost of private school education is inexorably rising. The cost of all education is rising. It's not just a question of schools, it's not a question of private schools, it's not a question of Jewish schools. All educational costs are rising faster than inflation for the last 30 years. We are not immune to that.
It was sort of just an expectation for me as I was growing up that Jewish education was a mainstay of what my upbringing would be like. And at this point, I've just found that the tuition costs are so astronomical that I just don't know how I'm going to be able to afford it into the future.
We were looking for leadership in our community, and we didn't have any. So we approached the then president of the Canadian Jewish Congress and sought out their counsel, his counsel, and he wasn't very receptive to our approach. He felt that there really wasn't much that we could do. And he was just trying to dissuade us from getting involved. You know, here we are, two parents working very hard to make a living, interested in volunteering our time, but there was no interest on the part of the leadership of the community to involve us in this very important issue.
And I ask the leadership all the time, are you prepared to come out and state publicly just how Jewish education is getting better? You know, is it getting more accessible, more affordable, higher quality, you know, higher levels of excellence? Just how is it getting better? And when you think about it more broadly, anybody in the private sector, anybody in government, politicians, they have to deliver improvement. They have to deliver improvement. And if they don't, they're out.
There are communities in North America that are finding solutions to the tuition crisis. A school in Calgary offers newcomers free tuition for their first 3 years. In East Brunswick, New Jersey, parents pitch in with the admin duties of the school, which lowers its overhead costs. In Pittsburgh and Milwaukee, parents pay a percentage of their income, so you pay the same price whether you have 1 kid in the school or 9. There's a lot of challenges facing Canada's Jewish community, and I hope on this trip to show that there's a lot of great people out there doing a lot of great things, and as much as possible we shouldn't try to focus too much on what's not working, and let's get inspired by the people who are making it work, and I think from that we can really make a difference.
I'm competing against one of the best, K through 12 public schools in America. There's a great public school system here, and also very strong private schools. I would say the thing that was hurting us greatly before I came, and thankfully the board had the vision to make the change, was that we weren't able to have the middle class come to the school anymore. It was, I think our tuition was close to $14,000, $15,000. And people were leaving. I mean, we weren't retaining kids. People were saying, hey, there's a great high school, why stay? There's a great middle school, why stay? And so we had to come up with a plan, or we would have, I don't think we'd be in business, I really don't think so. We'd be declining. I could say we're one of the few Jewish day schools in America that is growing. And I feel a major part of it is the new tuition system. We cut tuition in half, which was a gamble. And thankfully I've got a courageous board. We cut it in half, and we let people know that the only way it was going to work is that people continued to need to donate to make monetary gifts to the school. So the folks who were paying the full tuition before, they are still paying the full tuition, and they're able to write some of it off as a tax deductible donation. So also the key to it is that I have a strong parent community that does all the asks. I made it clear to the board that as an administrative team, we don't have the people to go out to, number one, explain the program, which is called the Access Program, and number two, to make all the solicitations. So when you have parents who are actually calling other parents and meeting with other parents and saying the success, the viability of the school is for you to be able to make donations to make it continue to be strong, that's been working. We don't turn anyone away from money, which is pretty extraordinary, because we just absolutely believe in the mission that if this Jewish child wants an education, we have to find a way.
Do you feel confident that you could say to parents, we did all we could to get education subsidized?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel very confident we did all we could.
The level of poverty in the Canadian Jewish community is certainly higher than any of us would want. You know, the old adage is one is too many.
Since we couldn't possibly solve the problems of Jewish poverty in our traditional ways of supplementing income, then better to have fewer of them. That there are 10 times as many Jewish poor people than the number of Jewish poor that get help from our agencies.
People who were more affluent in the Jewish community were unaware of the nature and extent of poverty in their own community.
The double invisibility of the Jewish poor, that they're invisible among the Jews because they're poor, and they're invisible among the poor because they're Jews.
Until some projects came along with community activists in the different cities, people were unaware that there were Jews living on the street, for example. They would have difficulty believing that there were Jews who were homeless, and yet there are.
Systems generally take on a life of their own. They have a voice of their own. They have rules of their own, and very often they're extremely hard to change those rules. And the people who are running them sometimes do them for a little bit too long, and they forget that they're dealing with human beings.
I'm calling up Federation agencies and saying, look, we're finding people like this. Would you please do outreach, follow up? Can we refer them to you? The answer was no. We don't impose our values on people that they need help when everyone knows how fine our services are and they can come to us.
I was surprised that not one homeless person had heard of Jewish social services, and even more surprised by the number of homeless shelters run by Toronto's organized Jewish community. None.
Jewish poor people are a group that federations had to have in order to raise money and to provide service. But helping them and dialoguing with them or including them in decisions that affected their lives are very different things. Every annual appeal of any federation in North America would show some poor Jew, and therefore we need money. But if you would ask the Jews, tell me about poor Jews, they'd say, don't know any, we're a success story. We bought into that ourselves, especially as we stratified and we didn't live next door to poor Jews anymore.
I'm here in Evanston, Illinois, where synagogues and churches have gotten together to tackle hunger. Each night of the week, a different congregation, a different temple, a different church opens up their doors for the people of the community. So it's not a one-off where they'll be fed one night, but the poor people in this community have a place to go for a meal every single night of the week. And I think this is a perfect example of how we can look outside the box if we have enough people who are really committed to a cause to get together and tackle it.
Yad Ezra was started by 5 individuals who felt that the food needs of low-income Jewish families were not being totally met. Meals on Wheels existed as a wonderful program, but there was no place for low-income Jewish families to get free kosher groceries. And so they got together and through the help of a local rabbi, Irving Schnipper, who went to his congregation and said, we need funds and we need volunteers. Yad Ezra started in 1990, providing supplemental food packages to families. Originally, we were serving about 250 families a month. Now we're up to 1,400 families a month, representing about 3,300 individuals, or 5% of the local Jewish population of southeastern Michigan. There is enough food in this country to feed everyone. It is not like we're looking for a cure for cancer or other deadly diseases. There is enough food. What needs to happen is that it has to become a priority to the people in this country that no one should go hungry.
While the federations are campaigning on the backs of the Jewish poor, It is the synagogues, the grassroots organizations, and the generosity of everyday people that are really making a difference.
The voluntary capacity of ordinary people to act and to care for their neighbors is what can change this.
A rule of thumb in Canadian Jewish philanthropy historically that, and I guess this has come mainly from a combined Jewish appeal or United Appeal statistics, that about 80 to 90% of the total come from about 5 to 10% of the donors.
It's very reassuring to drive by beautiful monuments with Hebrew letters and mandates to do the best for Jews, Israel, and the world. If we do too much of that, we're going to lose sight of the fact that the genius of the Jewish people is an investment. I'm using a modern word. There's probably a better Hebrew word for it, in people.
I'm donating to help get a building done. What about trying to ensure that people who are poor will actually get access to this building?
When you look at the buildings, it doesn't take long. You really have to wonder, what is their primary function? One might say, I would say that they're largely monuments.
Of what I see the future will bring is buildings, beautiful buildings that are empty of any Jewish content.
The person who's going to give you $5 million for a wonderful, and I say it's a wonderful wing of a hospital, isn't going to give you $5 million to set up an endowment to care for 1,000 elderly people every day of the week. Just not enough glamour in it.
Building fancy buildings can't necessarily be the number one priority always. Sometimes you have to slip in the interests of children.
Some numbers just jumped out on me. $2.4 million in advertising and promotions.
But I don't know where you're getting that from.
No, I looked at the tax return and there was a category of advertising and promotion. And I was just surprised that it was 2.4 million, which, I don't know, maybe that's on par with what you need to spend.
Again, I don't know how that figure was arrived at. There's a what's promotion, distributing a lot of education materials and getting the word out on the needs of the community and how, I'd have to analyze where it is. It's not just advertising, it's not just promotion. How it's categorized in the tax form is different.
Over time, it has become the Federation structures which have dominated the political and social reality of Jews, more so than synagogues or any other institution. They are the key big player in each city.
I mean, once every 4.5 years or so, politicians have to get out onto the streets and start shaking hands because ultimately they need that support. They have to, they're brought back down to earth, if I could say that.
I mean, if you disagreed with the Federation, where is your ability to turn to a Jewish organization to speak on your behalf? If you're not part of the system, then you're outside of the system, and who speaks for you?
Why is it that I have to scream or not be quiet in order for this system to understand that I should have a voice? Why is it that I need to be the one to make it happen? if the system is put in place in the first place to be a pseudo-government, to be a system that has the community's best interests in mind.
So when you look at all the tuition dollars that are spent, I mean, that's way more money than the UJA raises in their annual campaign. Yet these parents who raise this money, they have no power. They have virtually no power. It becomes sort of, if you don't like it, leave. I mean, that's frankly what a private organization operates. That's what it does.
Executives in the Jewish community, others, need to get paid a comfortable, decent salary. But I think the motivation for people to work in the Jewish community is their Jewishness and their commitment to Jewish ideals. And if they're not doing it for the salary or for the money.
Do you think the Jewish community would benefit from knowing what the CEO salaries are?
Tough question. Actually, my salary is listed, if people want to look it up.
Insofar as the community organizations are a de facto government of the voluntary Jewish community, members of that, what we might call polity, the Jewish polity in Canada, are entitled to know how their money is being spent.
Out of the 100 largest charities in Canada, not including hospitals, the only CEO salary that exceeds $350,000 was from the United Jewish Appeal of Greater Toronto. So who's the head of the United Jewish Welfare Fund? That's you.
There's a chairman of the board.
Right. No, I mean not including the lay leadership.
Yeah, I'm the head professional. Yeah, okay. President and CEO.
Above, you can see the tax returns of the UJA, with only one salary in the $200,000 to $250,000 range. Below, you have the United Jewish Welfare Fund of Toronto, which has 8 salaries that exceeds $200,000, including one that exceeds $350,000.
We have probably one of the lowest overheads of the major charities in Canada, and our cost of fundraising is around 10%.
In order to appear like there is a lower overhead cost, all the mega salaries of the top executives are paid through the welfare fund, reinforcing the illusion that only 10% of money goes towards overhead. If you make a $1 donation to UJA Federation, 15% goes to overhead. Of that, 60% is funneled to the United Jewish Welfare Fund, and 40% goes to the United Israel Appeal to fund even less transparent organizations like CJA. Each has its own overhead, leaving only 72 cents going to partner agencies, which each have their own overhead costs as well. Charity Intelligence, a non-profit watchdog, gave United Way of Toronto a top score of 3 for transparency. It gave the same score to World Vision Canada. Montreal's Jewish Federation received only 1 out of 3, and the United Jewish Appeal of Toronto received the lowest possible score of 0. Money Sense magazine ranked the largest fundraising charities in Canada according to their transparency. United Jewish Appeal of Toronto ranked dead last with the lowest possible score. The Jewish Federations were created to raise funds to help build and sustain a vibrant Jewish community. The generosity of this community has made that possible year after year. Now that the power has been centralized into the Jewish Federations, what does that mean for members of the Jewish community? Will there be an era of open dialogue, community building, and grassroots volunteerism? Or will there be an era where the community is told to stop asking questions and Sha Shtil?
I think we got to fund the potential of young people with social idealism linking together with the Jewish poor themselves and coming up with different models.
Right now is the time to build the cadre of future leadership. A leadership that will be an activist leadership, a leadership that's going to ask the tough questions and be prepared to roll up their sleeves.
Right now, what people think is, everything has to be done through the UJA or through CJA or through these, mammoth organizations. But really, in truth, it's the individual that will make a difference.
The only thing that's missing is the voice of the people that are being served. And I mean, that's what you have in a lot of broken systems, and a lot of systems that are in need of change and in need of innovation.
In the 21st century, if the Jewish community of Canada is going to thrive and survive and grow, somebody is going to have to start asking these questions and finding institutionally tried and proven ways of evaluating them.
But also one that has an open and independent and fearless Jewish media, which can report in a way that reflects the belief that the community is mature enough and strong enough to handle complete candor in every aspect of reporting, the way regular, normal media do it every day.
I think you just have to remember always that the Jewish community is not a monolith. There are a lot of different voices.
And we shouldn't be afraid of differences, right? We don't want a monolithic, lockstep kind of Jewish community.
In that distinctiveness is our ability, our genetic map to continue, because it gives us so much innovation and so much vibrancy and energy that we're going to be here for many, many generations to come.
I think the Jewish people really have to, for ourselves, have to try and become more introspective in a time which I think allows for that. And as I call it, we have to really work on the development of our soul, the Jewish soul.
Get informed. Research charities at sites like MoneySense, Charity Intelligence, and Charity Navigator. Ask questions about transparency, administrative costs, fundraising costs, and executive salaries. Donate directly to the cause. If you care about Jewish education, give directly to your school or synagogue. If you care about fighting poverty, donate directly to Jewish social services. By skipping the middleman, you make every dollar count. When I started this project, I was hoping to provide the Canadian Jewish community with a glimpse of what really goes on. The more questions I asked, the more doors were slammed in my face. I named the film Sha Shtil, Be Quiet, to pay homage to the generations of the past and a reminder to the generations of today. Answers will not come easily. If you want every child to receive a Jewish education, fight for it. If you want to see the alleviation of poverty, fight for it. If you want your voice, any voice, to be heard, then you have to fight for it. So I hope to some degree maybe start something, maybe start a trend where, the Jewish community has an outlet, it has an avenue to discuss some of the important issues in the community. You have to fight to end the Sha Shtil.